What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Titletown Talk. I'm your host, Ian Ewing. On today's episode, we're going to preview the Packers' Week 3 matchup against the Cleveland Browns. The Packers are coming off of a dominating win against the Washington Commanders and Jaden Daniels. And before that, they had a dominating win against the Detroit Lions in Week 1. So, our Green Bay Packers and us, the fans, are coming into this game feeling themselves a bit, as they should, and as we should. All the major networks that I saw had the Packers somewhere in the top 5 in their power rankings. I know Yahoo had them at number 1. Personally, my opinion is I think the Bills are slightly better, but I think the Bills are the only team that could really beat the Packers in a neutral field right now. That's how strongly I feel. But that being said, I think we all got to feel pretty happy about the way they've played so far. I know they're probably feeling the same way. Coming into this game with the Browns, I know it's going to be pretty easy to look ahead to next week against the Cowboys at the end of September. I believe it's September 28th, next Sunday. They need to come into this game ready to show that they're a Super Bowl team, like I believe they are. Super Bowl teams take care of inferior teams. That's why I said that. So as we've seen in other seasons, particularly 2019 through 2021, all three of those seasons, all the Rodgers teams in that era, they kind of play down to their competition a little bit. I'll never forget that Jaguars game. Maybe some of you remember that one. It was in 2020. I can't remember the Jags quarterback at that time. This was pre-Trevor Lawrence. But I believe they were winless at the time. And I think the Packers went into Jacksonville and almost lost that game. I think the game ended on a Rashawn Gary sack. But it got way closer than we thought, right? So this Browns team, they are not good on offense. But they do have a vet quarterback in Joe Flacco. The big concern here is the Browns defense. They have a really, really respectable unit with a lot of good players on it, specifically the superhero himself, Myles Garrett. The Browns have the number 1 defense in the NFL right now in yards allowed. So they gave up 41 points last week to the Ravens, but if you watch that game, and I ended up rewatching it, it was actually a lot closer than that. The Ravens took a long time to pull away, and that Browns defense played much better than the score would indicate. Currently, the Browns are giving up 191 yards per game. In terms of rushing yards, they're giving up only 45 yards per game. So this is one of the few defenses in the NFL right now that have actually played better than the Packers through the first 2 weeks. Now, I would argue that's a little bit of smoke and mirrors, right? In terms of stats, though, they're right up there with Green Bay. I expect the Browns to come into this game. They're going to come in and take Josh Jacobs away again. So this is the third team in a row that I believe will come in and say, we're going to make Jordan Love beat us. We'll get into this in a little bit, but this Browns defense, specifically against the run, is very good. They held Derrick Henry to 23 yards on 11 carries last week. I know the Bengals don't have much of a running game, but they shut them down too. Guys, just really quick before I move on, the Browns have played 2 teams. They've played the Bengals and the Ravens. Both teams, by the way, were thought to be, Super Bowl contenders in the AFC, right? Both of which would be, if you put together your top 5 offenses in the league this year, I believe we'd probably look at both of those teams in the top 5 to 7, the Bengals and the Ravens. They held the Bengals to 17 points, and they honestly should have won that game. The Bengals had 7 yards in the second half of that game. So I say all that to say, a defense like this can keep a very inferior Browns team in a game like this, especially when the Packers are on the road. Let's take a closer look at this team. So the top 5 graded players for the offense and defense for the Browns. I'm only going to grade the starters here. There's a few players that had higher ratings than this, but again, I'm just going to do the starters for this exercise. So on offense, their top rated offensive player is Joel Bitonio, their guard. Number 2 is Wyatt Teller, their other guard. Number 3 is Cornelius Lucas at 63. Oh, sorry, let me get into the grades, guys. Joel Bitonio has a 78 grade. Wyatt Teller, 74.6. Cornelius Lucas, their tackle, 63. So their top 3 players don't even have a grade over 80. And remember, 60 is average. So their third highest graded offensive player is Cornelius Lucas at 63. Harold Fannin, their rookie tight end, is at 59, and he's not really a starter, but I threw him on here anyway because he does get a lot of snaps. And Elliot Pocic, I believe is how you say it, their center, has a 58.7 grade. And Joe Flacco, their quarterback, 57.7, so below average for our boy Joe Flacco. So needless to say, this offense has struggled. And keep in mind, the defenses they went up against, the Bengals, very, very bad defense. Okay. The Ravens gave up 41 points to the Bills or 42 points or whatever it was to the Bills in week 1. So it's not like they've played like these vaunted defenses either, and they've still struggled. As far as the weapons on the Browns, let's talk about Quinshon Judkins first. So he is a player that I talked about in our draft preview. I had mentioned that I think the Packers are going to love him, and they probably did, by the way. I thought there was a really slim but slight possibility that they would draft a running back in the first round, knowing that Josh Jacobs is going to be, probably this might be his last year. Maybe next year is his last year. I thought that they would have Judkins highly ranked in their board, and they probably did. I'm glad they didn't take him. I'm glad they picked Golden, don't get me wrong, but I really like Quinshon Judkins a lot. He was the running back for Ohio State last year. He was one of 2 running backs, I believe, that got drafted. So he made his debut last week. He had 63 yards on 10 carries or something like that. So he had a decent first game. Jerry Jeudy at receiver. He's been an underrated wide receiver for a while now, I would say. He's never really lived up to his draft stock, though. Keep in mind, he was drafted by the Broncos back in 2020. The Browns traded for him before last season, I believe. And he kind of broke out last season despite shite quarterback play, to put it lightly. He had 90 catches for 1,200 yards. I thought that was a pretty damn good season. This guy is, again, he's a fantastic route runner. He's got phenomenal hands. So I think Jerry Jeudy is always someone to keep an eye on. Now, I don't think he is a guy who matches up poorly against the Packers defensive backs. In fact, I think it's a good matchup. But you can't sleep on Jerry Jeudy. Outside of Judkins and Jeudy, though, in terms of receivers and running backs, there's not really anybody else I'm afraid of. Cedric Tillman, he's their number 2 wide receiver. I liked him coming out of the draft a few years back, but he's a wide receiver 3 or 4 on a regular team. He'd be wide receiver 6 on the Packers. And he's basically having to be wide receiver 2. They did sign Isaiah Bond, who had, I believe it was a domestic abuse charge against him before the draft, and that made him go undrafted. He was, I guess, cleared of that charge, I believe, recently, and he was signed just before training camp ended by the Browns. He would have been a second-round pick probably if he didn't have the legal trouble. So, he's somebody you got to keep an eye on. He was Matthew Golden's teammate at Texas. He was a really, 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 really fast, dynamic, playmaking wide receiver who's a bit undersized, but I don't know how ramped up he is right now, but I think they're going to have some plays for him that we got to keep an eye on. Their tight ends are interesting. David Njoku is a vet. That dude is a monster athlete. I think he's like 6'5", 250 something. If you just look at the guy, he's number 85. Those of you that don't know who he is, just watch for him in the game. He is a really, really good tight end. Very underrated tight end. He's had a good career so far. Again, great size, freak show athlete. We've seen some of the Packers linebackers get lost in coverage before. Quay Walker. I think that he is somebody we need to keep a really close eye on in this game. Harold Fannin Jr. is a guy they drafted at tight end. I believe he went to Notre Dame. I could be wrong on that. I think that's wrong, actually. But Harold Fannin Jr., he was drafted in the 5th round this last season, I believe. I'm really guessing on this one, guys. He's had a couple good games to start. They do run a lot of 2 tight end sets on the Browns. So you got to keep an eye on him, too. I do think they'll probably run quite a bit of 12 personnel in this game against the Packers. I think they're going to try to run the ball significantly. We'll get into that in a minute. Overall, though, this offense doesn't really have anyone that I'm afraid of. Their offensive line is very shaky. We'll get into that in a bit. They don't really have any weapons. I think this team is at least 2 or 3 years away from being really competitive on offense. Again, their defense, it's scary. But on offense, I think the Packers have a chance to really dominate this game on defense. Okay, let's finish the offense with Joe Flacco really quick. So since he joined the NFL, he's probably had one of the best pure arms in the NFL during that time. He can still hurt you now. If you look at last season, I thought he played well for the Colts. He took over for Anthony Richardson and tried to get them kind of a late playoff push. Here's the thing, though. The Colts has a ton of talent at wide receiver, and they have a good offensive line and a good running game. So seeing Joe Flacco do well last year, you have to kind of tip your cap to what he had around him, right? This team, oh boy, he is to put it lightly, he's a sitting duck back there. I think we all need to be on the lookout in this game for a quarterback switch. If you guys remember back in 2020, the Packers played the Eagles and they put in Jalen Hurts in the second quarter and the game got close when they pulled Carson Wentz. Not saying that would happen here, but bringing a young quarterback in that can move off the bench, especially if Joe Flacco struggles in that first quarter, I think this is something we got to be aware of. If they bring in Dylan Gabriel, I don't think they'll bring in Shedeur Sanders, but we'll see. The Packers have to be aware of that, and I do think that could provide a spark that they're not quite ready for. Okay, as far as the Browns defense, I've already been talking them up quite a bit. There's only one reason why this could be a trap game. I don't believe there are trap games in the NFL. I think that's kind of a fan thing. But a lot of people in my circle that I've talked to think that the Packers are going to dominate this game, and I think they can and will. But if there's one reason that they don't, it's going to be because this Browns defense slows down Jordan Love and the offense, okay? It all starts with Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett, we did an entire episode on Myles Garrett. I believe it was my third ever podcast when he asked to be traded in the offseason. He's the only other guy in the NFL, aside from Micah Parsons, who can single-handedly wreck a game. What we saw from Aiden Hutchinson last year, I think I don't know if we're ever going to see that again from Hutch, to be honest. He's probably always going to be a top 5 edge rusher, but he's never going to look like that again, in my opinion. Nick Bosa is very good. There's other guys who are really good. But Myles Garrett is in a class of his own. He is a freak show of all freak shows. He's going to be a Hall of Fame player. I could not be higher on him. I could not be more afraid of him wrecking this game. Their top 5 players from PFF on defense, Devin Bush at linebacker with a 91.2. Devin Bush was a first-round pick by the Steelers, I believe, in 2018 or 2019. He was a top 10 pick, I believe. He never lived up to that. I think it was the same draft that Jair was picked, so 2018. He's really come into his own this season on the Browns. Go figure. Malik Collins, defensive tackle, 90.4. He's also another guy who's kind of broken out this year. He had a really, really strong finish at the end of 2024. Again, he on the interior against Aaron Banks, Elton Jenkins, I feel good about it. Sean Ryan as well, but he's also wrecked shop against a couple good lines. I shouldn't say it. Let me back up for a second. The Bengals do not have a good offensive line, but he did grade well against the Ravens. Also, Myles Garrett is their number 3 ranked player with an 85.2. Number 4 is Carson Schlesinger, linebacker. I think I covered him in the draft episode. He was picked in the first round at the end of the first round. And actually, it might have been the early second, either way. Rookie coming in, playing really, really well. They have Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Some of you might know. If you don't know who I'm talking about, you guys probably heard that name and you're like, is this guy making stuff up? I'm not, I promise. I think they have a hell of a linebacker trio once he returns from injury. I believe he's out the whole season with a knee injury or something. Either way, Carson Schlesinger's played very, very well this season. He was thought of pretty highly. He's a good athlete. Really, really strong start for a rookie here. And then their number 5 ranked player is the safety, Grant Delpit from LSU. I was a big fan of him back in the 2020 draft, I believe. He's had a little bit of a slow start to his career. He really came on last season, and he's their number 5 ranked player so far. So as you can tell, in comparison to their offense, this is much better on defense in terms of a grade standpoint. Their highest ranked player on defense are graded as 91.2. Their highest graded player on offense is 78.4. So as you can see, their defense is quite good. It all starts with a defensive line. So Myles Garrett has 10 pressures already and 4 sacks in 2 games. Yeah, let me repeat that. 10 pressures and 4 sacks. So again, you guys know, I think sacks are a really stupid stat. They don't really tell the story of a pass rusher. He's got 4 of those. So, where's pressures, right? Well, they're high, 10. The other edge spot is a guy by the name of Isaiah McGuire, and he has 9 pressures this season already. So again, he was a mid-round pick, I believe, 2 years ago. He's really come on this season. I think he had a strong finish last year as well. He has 9 pressures, like I said. They have some depth there. Mason Graham was the 5th overall pick. He's really starting to figure it out. He's had a bit of a slow start this season, but I really liked him coming out of Michigan. He was a top 5 pick for a reason. We don't want this to be the game where he comes out and breaks out. The biggest surprise of the year, though, I mentioned Malik Collins. He has 6 pressures on the season. He has a 91 pass rushing grade, though, from PFF. Again, 60s average. I'm going to say that on every episode. In other words, to sum it all up, These guys can rush the passer. This is not a Detroit Lions situation where, it's just Aiden Hutchinson and nobody else, right? All of these guys on this defensive line can kill you. If you just focus on Myles Garrett, Isaiah McGuire has had a good season. Devin Bush has rushed the passer. Man, I can't talk today, guys. Devin Bush has rushed the passer quite well this season, too. He has a high pass rushing grade. We talked about him a little bit. He is really living up to his draft stock now in year 7 or whatever it is. Their front seven is really, really good. This is probably one of the best that the Packers are going to face all season. So if we see a strong performance from the Packers offense in this one, it's going to say a lot. If we don't see a strong performance, it doesn't say much because this is a really good team. They're not going to face a defense this good again until they play the Eagles later this season. And again, somebody else could rise up, I know, but this is a really, really good team, and we have to be, cognizant of that on Sunday. The vulnerability on this defense, though, is in their secondary. Delpit has a 79 grade, but it's been a lot of run defense. His pass coverage grade is only 70. So I don't think their safeties are very good. I don't even know who the other guy is, to be honest. I hadn't heard of him yet. It doesn't matter. At cornerback, they have Greg Newsome. Ooh, boy. If you guys knew me back then, I don't think anybody listening to this would have heard my draft takes. I was living in Arizona at the time in 2021. My wife and I were going to Jamaica for our honeymoon, ironically, when the 21 draft happened. And we were packing the night before when the draft was going on, night 1. And I knew the Packers were going to pick a corner. They needed one, right, to go opposite of Jair. They pick Eric Stokes, which I thought was a reach. It obviously proved to be correct that it was a reach. Greg Newsome was the guy that I really, really wanted in that draft. And the Browns picked him, I believe, 2 picks before the Packers. Ultimately, he's been a pretty big disappointment in the NFL. This season, he's got a 66 grade in coverage, which doesn't sound great, but it's actually an improvement for him, which is crazy. He does wear number 0, which I think looks really sick in those Browns unis. Denzel Ward on the other side of Greg Newsome. I've always liked Denzel Ward. I do think he's always been a little bit overrated. I believe at one point he got paid more than Jair. He's definitely making top 10 cornerback money. He has a 55 grade in coverage so far this season. And he got dusted a few times by Zay Flowers last week against the Ravens. That if you watch the all 22 of that game, we are talking about a brutal game. So I think you can attack this secondary. And I do think the game plan in this one for the Packers is going to be throw the ball. So again, the Browns are going to go into it saying, we're going to stop Josh Jacobs. We're going to play single high. I dare you to beat us without Jaden Reed. And the Packers are going to say, ha, we will indeed beat you. So let's get to the keys of the game on offense. I'm going to take a quick drink of water, guys. I don't know how to edit this and stop it, so I'm going to take a drink of water quick. Let's talk about key number 1 on offense for the Packers. Number 1 is the most obvious. Everybody that you've listened to this week or you will listen to will say the same thing. Do not let Myles Garrett beat you. So I just went in on a little rant there about the other guys who can hurt you on the defensive line. That's true. But the Packers are also no slouches on their own end, especially in pass protection. Okay. The Packers offensive line this season has given up the fewest pressures of any offensive line in the game, playing against some good competition. Okay. So the Packers are no slouches. We can't just go in saying, okay, we're going to stop Myles Garrett and then everybody else is going to kill us. I think that they'll hold up fine. The game plan has to be let Malik Collins or Isaiah McGuire or let them have to send 5 on a blitz to beat you, right? If they do that, you tip your cap, you take it on the chin, but you cannot let Myles Garrett win this game. So if you give Jordan Love time to throw, I mentioned the secondary is not very good. I think they're going to tear the defense apart. Now, Tucker Kraft, I want to talk about him quick. And by the way, this scared the hell out of me yesterday. Some of you might be on Twitter as much as me. It was initially tweeted that Tucker Kraft tweaked his knee in practice. Whenever you hear tweaked knee in practice, you think of Bakhtiari basically being out for the rest of his career after his tweak in practice. Turned out to be a false alarm. It was no big deal. But there is still some doubt that he might not play this week. So whoever plays tight end for the Packers, they're going to probably chip Myles Garrett frequently. They're probably going to slide a guard over to make sure he's never one-on-one. And that's going to leave some one-on-one opportunities for the other guys. Ultimately, I think the Packers are good enough on the offensive line to win this one. against the other guys. If Zach Tom doesn't play, my biggest fear will be Anthony Belton, the rookie, against Myles Garrett. Belton didn't give up any pressures last week when he did play. They rotated him and Darian Kinnard a little bit at the beginning of that game, as you might remember. And they ended up leaving Belton out there in the second half. In this game, I think you have to play Darian Kinnard if Zach Tom can't play. I just don't think a rookie versus a future Hall of Fame pass rusher is a good idea. I don't think they should be rotating. It needs to be Darian Kinnard until he proves that he can't do it. So that's my take on this one. I hope Zach Tom is going to play. He said today that he's got pain when he was running. I'm recording this on Friday. Yesterday he said that, and Wednesday. I can't talk today, guys. I'm sorry. Apparently I didn't have enough coffee. So Wednesday, they asked him if he had any pain. He said it only hurt when I ran. It didn't hurt when I ran or moved laterally. Yesterday, I guess somebody asked him about his injury on Thursday, and he did the Heisman pose. So it sounds like he's feeling better. If he's like 80% of himself, that's still worrisome over there. Aaron Banks, though, is going to play. So he told Rob Demovsky, I believe, of ESPN that he's going to play this week. So at least you have some continuity there. I do wonder if they put Jordan Morgan out there at right tackle if Banks is going to play. I just think they need to have stability over there. They need to have somebody who's ready for that challenge. I think Zach Tom versus Myles Garrett, he's actually a good matchup for Zach Tom because what he does, Zach Tom's so athletic and he's so good at his technique that it forces Myles Garrett to have to change his game plan. So I do think Myles Garrett is a much better player. He's better than every tackle in the league, in my opinion, but you can still slow him down enough. So key number 2, let Jordan dice up this secondary and take apart these cornerbacks. Here's an interesting stat. So the Browns lead the league so far in the percent of man coverage used. So they play man on 51% of their snaps, which is the highest in the league. The other two teams, so number 2 and 3 on that list, are in the 40s, the low 40s, and they're both the Lions and the Commanders, ironically. So the Packers have played a lot of man coverage so far this season, and they've been able to win. So I do think that this plays into the Packers' hand a bit here. You have Matthew Golden's speed, and he's going to be playing in the slot in this game, I believe, because Jaden Reed's going to be out. Dontavian Wicks, phenomenal route runner, and he's great at gaining separation. I think these two specifically can open up the game in this one. That leads me to prediction number 1. I'm going to kind of blend it into key number 2 here, but I think Matthew Golden's going to go off in this game. I have Matthew Golden in fantasy. I also have Marvin Harrison Jr., and he's been a big letdown so far. So I have a feeling, I think Matthew Golden's going to break out here. I think I'm going to start Matthew Golden in this game and just hope for the best. If I end up losing on that, then, hey, I did my best. Dalton Kincaid got me 17 points last night, so hopefully that will, subsidize me a bit. But Matthew Golden so far, here's a great stat for you guys. He leads the league so far in ASS, and that does not stand for S. Average separation score, meaning he's getting open at a higher rate than anybody else in the NFL right now. And let me repeat that. The NFL, not the rookie class, the entire NFL. And if you guys watch the tape, you'll see it. He's running open on... He had a really, 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 really good score this week in separation, or getting separation. And you can see it on tape. Andy Herman of Packer Report, Pack-A-Day Podcast, he does grading every week. Matthew Golden didn't have a catch in this game, and he was his second highest graded player on offense. So that just shows you that he was winning early and often. He should have had 90-plus yards receiving in this last game, maybe 2 touchdowns. I think this is going to start clicking this week. Jaden Reed being out until late November, Golden's going to get a lot more time in the slot. The Browns starting cornerback in the slot is Miles Harden, and his coverage grade, grab something, guys, his coverage grade is only 47. So, needless to say, you can take advantage of them in the slot, and I think that they will. I think Jordan, if he has time to throw in this game, I think this could get really ugly in our favor. That's the issue. I don't think he's going to have a ton of time to throw. So, briefly, before I move on, I want to touch on Romeo Doubs. Romeo is... I love Romeo Doubs. I still don't think he's going to be back next season unless he has a huge year. He's actually third in the NFL right now in separation score. So this is a team and a wide receiver room that I think is more than good enough to win in man coverage against the Browns, and I think that they will in a big way. So that's key number 2. Key number 3, do not give up on the run. So again, I said in the last episode, I'll continue to say it, So far, the game plan against the Packers is don't let Josh Jacobs beat you. And I have to give LaFleur credit for this. He has continued to give Josh Jacobs 20-plus carries in both games, despite the fact that it hasn't been working. Okay? So you have to tip your cap there because, again, the entire offense is predicated on play action. And a game like this where you have a really good pass rush to go against, you got to run the ball. Run at the pass rush, keep them off balance, run play action. That's going to buy you a lot of time. I don't think there's a better way to slow this team down than to run and use play action. So I think the Packers are going to do that in this one. I do think that they're getting their full offensive line back is going to help. I think one of the reasons last week that they didn't run block very well was because they didn't have their starters in there. Jordan Morgan played really, really well against the pass, but he did not run block well. So that's number 3. Do not give up on the run. Number 4, take advantage of the cornerback's aggressiveness. Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome both are kind of known for jumping routes, and they do it a lot. They're very aggressive, which is good in some ways, right? They like to challenge people on their routes. They like to jam them early, right? If there was ever a game to hit these guys with a double move or a play action shot play, it would be this game. Again, if you give Jordan time to throw, if you give these routes time to develop, if you can let him pump fake, I think they're going to be really aggressive, continue to push the ball downfield in the passing game. And I think they'll probably have, I'll predict this one, Jordan's going to complete 2 deep balls in this one. One to Matthew Golden and one to, Dontavian Wicks, we'll say. Key number 5, this is probably true in every game, but do not turn the ball over. One of the fastest ways to lose a game against an inferior opponent is to turn the ball over. Okay? So again, when you're facing an inferior unit, aka the Packers defense, versus the Browns offense, that Packers have a massive advantage there. Do not give them an easy score, because if you throw an interception and they get the ball at the 30, you just gifted them 3 points. If you make the Browns take the ball 70, 80 yards on every drive, they're just not going to do it. So don't give them a short field and make sure that you take care of the ball here. The Browns are also similar to the Packers where they like to knock the ball out, pound the ball out, force fumbles. This is not the game to put the ball on the ground, to say the least. Don't give him an easy score, right? Jordan has not thrown a pick in his last 9 regular season games, and this is not the one to have to break it, right? LaFleur is going to have a plan for when Jordan's under pressure. I think he has to have one. If he doesn't, I'm sure he does, right? He's got to have outlets for him to throw to. If Jordan's under duress, there's got to be somewhere he can go where he doesn't have to force the ball. There's no need to force anything in this game. If it's not there, take the check down. Now, I do think they can be aggressive because, again, if they do give the Browns the ball at the 40, their own 40, well, I think the Packers defense is going to win that battle more often than not. They just have to be smart. That's all. Let's get to the keys on defense. So, key number 1, make Joe Flacco beat you, so stop the run. So, in a normal game, the Packers' game plan is always going to be to get ahead early, get up 2-3 scores, right, just like they did in the first 2 games, and then force the opposing offense to throw. Make them play catch up, right? When you do that, you make them one-dimensional, you force them to throw, and then you can just tee off on that defensive line, right? You can send Micah in different places. They can send blitzes. They can rush 4 and win, right? The reason this game is interesting is because I don't think the Packers are going to get this big lead on the Browns. And if they do, guys, we have to be very, very, very encouraged. If they win this game 27-13 or whatever, the most impressive thing in this game will be the fact that they tore apart this Browns defense, okay? It's a very talented defense. If I had to predict, I do not think that the Packers are going to get this big lead. They might be up to like a 3-0 lead or a 6-0 lead or 7-0 lead. And that might be all they have for the whole first half, depending on how this goes. So you're going to have to stop the run. If you can make them one-dimensional and you can make Joe Flacco drop back and throw it, they're not going to win that game. I talked earlier about how much I like Judkins. Sorry, I can't say his name apparently. And I really do love it, right? But I do not think Jerome Ford and Dylan Sampson are going to be able to take over the game. That being said, they are talented on their interior at run blocking. And they're talented enough back there to have a balanced attack if, you give them the opportunity. So do not make any better. It should be 3rd and 4 or longer at every single third down. Make the Browns poor tackles, stand up against Micah Parsons and Rashawn Gary. This is how you beat them into submission, right? And let me get to key number 2 that kind of blends into this. Pressure Joe Flacco and put him in hell. That's key number 2. If the Packers can get even 70% of the production that they've gotten from their pass rush so far in this game, they're going to dominate up front. Again, I said earlier, there's no doubt that, if you give Joe Flacco some time, he can make any throw. But when he's pressured, it's not so easy for him. So again, if you put pressure on this guy, put him in hell, the Packers are going to win this one big. So far this season, I'm going to read these stats to you guys. Under pressure, Joe Flacco is 13 of 31, which is under 50% completion, for only 134 yards, 1 touchdown, and three turnover-worthy plays. 2 interceptions, too. So he's taken 4 sacks on those plays, he's had 8 throwaways, and he hasn't scrambled a single time. So again, if you pressure him, you're going to beat him, right? He's going to throw you a few in every game. That's been the case for Joe Flacco's whole career. He's a bit of a gunslinger. He takes chances, right? In this one, if he throws you one, you got to catch it, which will be the next key in a minute. Coming off of a game like the Washington game, where they had to watch Jaden Daniels and make sure he didn't run it, this is going to be a lot more fun for the defense. They're not going to have to worry about their rush lanes. They can just rush, and have a good old time, and I think they will. That brings me to key number 3, capitalizing your turnover opportunities. When you're playing against a really good defense, one of the easiest ways to score on them is to give them a short field. So, if the Packers can turn them over and get the ball on the 30, you're going to score, right? If you have to go, 90 yards on every drive this week, like they did last week a few times, the Packers, it's much tougher against this team. Joe Flacco, he's going to throw you a few in every game. I just said that, right? It's crucial that when he does, the Packers catch it. We had a lot of plays last year where the secondary dropped interceptions, right? Xavier McKinney dropped one last week that he should have had. And then in week 1, Quay Walker had one in his breadbasket that he dropped, right? And he's had a history of dropping picks. This is not the game to drop an interception. If they knock the ball out, get on it, right? If you turn the Browns over, you get the ball on a short field, get a quick 7 points, or a really fast score that you weren't expecting to get, right? You can win a game like this big against a really good defense, right? I think it's going to be a really, really important part of this game. I think through 2 games, the defense, they've only had 1 turnover. It was the Evan Williams pick from week 1. They had a couple chances in the last game. They've had a few chances, and they had a few chances in week 1 as well. I think this is the game where they get 2 or 3 of them, and then they break the game open. Okay, so again, the turnovers have not been there yet. Hafley was asked about this week. He said, you don't need picks or fumbles or turnovers in general to be a good defense. But I think in this one, you need them big time. Key number 4, keep an eye on the tight ends. I mentioned earlier about, David Njoku. He's probably their best player on offense, and he's a big mismatch, right? Quay Walker, I mentioned he gets lost in coverage a lot. As good as he's been in the run game and rushing the quarterback, he's getting lost in coverage just like he used to, right? So I do think the tight ends could be somewhere they focus in this game. Do not let the tight ends beat you, right? Make Joe Flacco beat you with difficult throws. Don't leave the middle of the field wide open. We've seen it so many times with the Joe Barry era. We saw it a few times last year where the tight ends are just running wide open. This is not the game for that. They got 2 really good tight ends here. Key number 5, unleash Micah Parsons. This can and will be a key in almost every game, but in this one specifically, Micah needs to take over. The Browns' tackles are really, really bad. They've been a constant liability in both games. The Browns have given up 40 pressures in 2 games, which is nuts. Their pass blocking efficiency rate is 30th in the NFL out of 32 teams. Cornelius Lucas and DeJuan Jones, their 2 tackles, they've given up 20 pressures each. Wyatt Teller, their guard, even though he's been good at run blocking, he's given up 8 pressures. I think Micah, Gary, Devontae Wyatt, LVN, whoever they blitz, I think they can totally take over this game. You just have to make sure that they're consistently in a place where they have to throw it, especially on like 3rd and long. I think if Micah can take a couple double teams, force the other guys into one-on-ones, they need to take advantage of, and I think they will. I think in this game, we're going to see it in a big way. The Packers probably end up with 15-plus pressures. I'm going to say 20 more in this game. I think we see 8-plus pressures from Micah in this game. With Joe Flacco being the statue that he is back there, I think you can take advantage of that in this one. Almost done. Players to watch. I'll touch on these briefly. Matthew Golden. I think he's going to break out in this one. If you have him on your fantasy team, I would start him this week. I'm starting him in my league. If he doesn't do well, oops. Sorry if I ruined your guys' week, but I do think he's going to break out in this one. I think he cashes in on all the opportunities he gets. He's going to have a lot of opportunities in the slot against their worst corners. I expect we see a deep shot to him in this one. I bet he scores a touchdown. I think he's going to have a big game. Savion Williams, I mentioned in week 1, players to watch, that he would have a fun role. That Wildcat play he had last week was really, really fun. I think he's going to get additional opportunities as well in this game with Jayden Reed being out. I do think that I said in the last one, right, he's going to have a play or two every game where the casual fan who doesn't know who he is going to be like, wow, who's 83? I bet we see that in this game again. He had that really nice run out of the Wildcat. He had another play out of the backfield last week where they faked it to Jacobs, handed it to Savion, and he was down the sidelines. He did step out kind of early, but I think Savion can be a real weapon here. LVN, I think, is going to get a ton of one-on-ones here. He had a little bit of a slow week against the Commanders last week, but I bet we see him bounce back in this one. Carrington Valentine, I predict he's going to have his first interception in this game. And I bet he's been waiting for it in the season. He almost jumped her out last week and got one. I think in this one he cashes in and gets one. Xavier McKinney, been very, very quiet in the first couple games. Not because he hasn't been playing well. Hafley said that he's playing his best football ever. He almost had that pick last week. I think he breaks out in this one. We start hearing his name a bit more in this one. Last but not least, Darian Kennard and Anthony Belton. If Zach Tom does not play, all of our eyes need to be on who's playing right tackle. Because they're going to be playing Myles Garrett, and they're going to be insanely important in this game. If we see that, if we see even a B game from them, I'd be happy with that. It needs to be an A game from whoever it is over there. So we need to watch that closely. Quick, sneaky one. I think Luke Musgrave is going to have a bigger game in this one. Now, this is cheating if Tucker is indeed hurt and doesn't play. If he does play, I think Musgrave's going to get a lot more looks in this one. I think Musgrave against those linebackers and safeties is a massive mismatch. I bet he has a sneaky big role in this one. So watch Luke Musgrave in this one. Final prediction. I think the Packers do win this game, and I think they do it through defense again. I think we'll see a few turnovers forced from the Packers defense in this one. I think they're going to pressure the shit out of Joe Flacco, pardon my French. On offense, I think we see a patient yet opportunistic finish where the Packers do pull away late. I think the final score, 23-10 Packers. I bet it feels like a bigger win than that, though, when we look back at it. I think the score is going to be low because I think they're going to kick a lot of field goals. And that's good for my fantasy team also because I have Brandon McManus. So hopefully that does happen. As long as they win, I don't care. I probably would caution anyone who thinks this is going to be an easy game. The only way this game does get close is if the Packers make a lot of mistakes. But I think they're going to really have to fight for this one. They're going to have to earn it. So again, the only way that the Browns win this game and actually upset the Packers is if the Packers turn it over. Make a ton of mistakes, have a lot of penalties, right? Don't get yourself into those situations if you're the Packers. I think they will be efficient on offense. I think they'll take their time. They'll stick with the run, and I think they get another W in this one. Thank you guys for listening to the episode. We will be right back after the game for our review episode. Give the podcast a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, like it, download it, all the stuff, anything you guys can do to support it. I massively appreciate it. We did see some increase in downloads this week, so thank you guys. I appreciate you listening. We will see you after the game. Go Pack, go.